All right, so this is a thing that, from a guy's point of view, it doesn't make sense because when a guy does something, especially with dating or whatever, we're like, okay, I'm doing this so that then this could happen, so then this could happen, then blah, 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 eventually down the line, get a lay, okay? So the only reason, basically, why we would start talking to a girl is if we want to have sex with her eventually. Girls don't think that way, all right? I'm not saying it's 0%, but to a very large degree, they just enjoy the moment and they are just, they just want to experience that particular moment. And then, if it so happens that when they're in that moment, they feel like going to the next moment, then they will. So, a girl could look at you because she's attracted to you. Like, people do that all the time. Like, relationship or not, whatever. Like, you see an attractive person, what? Like, you look at them. And the thing is that girls have so much power, though, that they can get reactions out of guys. So, what they'll do is they'll look at a guy sometimes just to see if he'll look back and be like, ha, yes, got one. Or they'll be like, oh, I'm attracted to that guy. I wonder if he's attracted to me. Oh, he looked back? Cool, yeah, he's attracted. And sometimes that's the only feeling they wanted. They just wanted the validation. That doesn't mean they're bitches. That doesn't mean whatever. They just live in a different world. All right? So, if you go over and talk to them, if all they wanted was just for you to look back, then when you come up to them, they'll be like, oh, what are you doing here? Blah, blah, blah. Because they don't think that far ahead. They don't think, well, if I give him a look, then he'll come over and then I'll have to deal with, like, they literally don't think that far. Or sometimes, I honestly think most girls are not huge fucking bitches and egotistical and stuff. Some of them are, and I think on average they are more that way than guys, but most of the time it's not really harmful. You know, it's just, oh, I think that guy's attractive. Sometimes it's, oh, I want to get validation. Sometimes it's, I want him to come over so that way I can reject him and I feel powerful. Yeah, girls do that. Now you might say, well, guys don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of guys, if they had the power, they would do shit like that. Like all the fuck boys and all the, assholes that girls date, they do shit like that. So I think that guys would do mostly the same thing if they had the power. So basically, if their mood changes, oh, another common one is, let's say you're at a club or something like that, you invite a girl to dance, and she dances with you, and she's into it, and she might even fucking make out with you right there on the dance floor. And then, you know, you try to talk to her, or maybe, talk to her and try to pull her back to your place, and she's like, oh no. Guys will think, her mind must have changed. I must have done something wrong. And sometimes that's true, but most of the time, they just wanted that experience. Girls don't do actions necessarily, sometimes they do, but most of the time, they don't do an action to then get to the result or get to the next stage. They're just like, you know what? I feel right now like dancing with a guy and making out with a guy. I just feel like doing that. So then, they'll dance with the guy, maybe make out, and sometimes that's the only level of stimulation they wanted because girls enjoy every part of the process. For a guy, we only kind of go through the process to get laid, but girls literally enjoy, for different reasons, all the parts of the process. So she might talk to you, and then she might even dance with you and make out with you, and all of a sudden she's quote unquote cold or she pulled back or whatever. A lot of the times when that happens, it's just, well, that's all she wanted. She just wanted to go out and dance with some guys and make out. And sometimes you even see that same girl and she does the same thing to like 3 other guys. And you're like, oh, she's a fucking slut. Oh, she's changing her mind all the time. I mean, she might be a slut, but sometimes it's just, hey, I have this power and I can use it. And I like all the points of the experience instead of guys who just only want the result. And so I'm just going to do this thing. And that's another reason why sometimes girls will, on an approach, maybe they'll even flirt back with you a little bit and even give you their number, and then they don't respond. Because sometimes it's like, ooh, I'm enjoying this flirting. But that doesn't mean that they're actually going to hook up with you. They're just, oh, I'm enjoying the flirting, and so they'll do it back. And then even giving the number. Like sometimes girls they just like engaging in the process or having the experience. Ooh, I gave this random guy my number. Ooh, that was fun. But they had no intention of hooking up. So that's a really hard thing for guys to realize, is that basically how you hook up with a girl is you make each point, each point in the process, a good experience for her so that she wants to move on to the next thing. And sometimes, like, if a girl rejects you or blah blah whatever, or she just leaves, sometimes it's just because that's all she wanted. And it's being able to not take that personally and just go on to the next girl that's really important for getting laid. Um, Sometimes the guy does something wrong. I'm not going to say it's always the girl's fault, but a good portion of the time, like, oh, she did all this and then changed her mind. Why? If the guy didn't do something super crazy out of nowhere, usually it's because the girl just wanted that experience, or she wasn't actually thinking about hooking up with you at that point in time, or she was maybe open to it, but then she's like, I don't want it. I don't want it that much. Fuck it. Yeah, it's usually not worried about what their friends think. I mean, sometimes it can be, but a lot of times it's just their own emotions and just how girls are in general. Yeah, no, they're not faking it. Sometimes girls fake it. I mean, kind of, but those are really only the really fucking manipulative ones. I mean, maybe way back in the day, like 20, 30 years ago, maybe a girl would kind of fake it because it's like, oh, I'm kind of supposed to do this. And like men and women weren't as equal back then. So they kind of felt like they more had to fake it sometimes. Now, the only reason a girl would fake it, quote unquote, fake it, is if she's kind of just manipulative. Most of those times where they flip back and forth, they weren't faking it originally. They just wanted that singular experience. So, yeah, you might think, if you try and process girls' actions through the lens of how men think, it will never make sense. Okay? Like, all that stuff I said, you're probably, well, that's not logical, and that's like not blah 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 whatever. But that's because you're thinking like a guy. Girls think completely differently. As an example, it would be kind of like, let's say that at every point in the process for a guy, he like had an orgasm or something. So just getting a girl's number, oh, orgasm, or it felt like sex. Just going on the date, oh, it felt like sex. So a girl would really have to try really hard to convince you to get to the point to actually have sex, because every point in the process feels like sex. That's not necessarily like a perfect one-to-one analogy, but yeah, just to kind of give you an idea. But yeah, that is probably a thing that really messes with guys. They think it's logical. They think that the girl is thinking 5 steps ahead like the guy is. She's not. And that's why too much focusing on the process and like, I gotta get her to this, and well, she did this before, and so blah blah blah, or well, I'm attractive, so therefore all the work should be done. No, you still have to make it a good experience at every point in the process so that she wants to move on to the next step. All right, so I'm gonna be a little out of breath for this fucking voice note because I'm doing night game right now, and I'm just heading back to my truck to get a fucking energy drink real quick. So text game is important in online because you don't have the benefit of them being able to get a general idea about you like from an in-person meeting. So text game for online is more important because you have to try and portray things that normally would just be apparent on the approach. I don't do online. Like, I haven't done online for like 6 years. Almost all of my approaches are just from cold approach. I think there was a point where I did online, but I'm gonna say maybe of 250-ish ladies that I have, probably, I'm gonna say 25% maybe are from online. Those are pretty much within the first 3 years. So the reason why text game is not really important for a cold approach is because they already have a conception of you from what they know of you from the approach. So any text you send, they are going to view it through the lens of how you were on the approach. So, I mean, that's how anyone does anything. You could have a person who's like a very close family member who you trust, and they could send a certain text, and then another person who's kind of just an acquaintance and you're not sure about them, and they could send the same text and you would view them completely differently based on your conception of them. So for texting, the main thing, like you don't need to kind of create an experience, because like most of the experience is based on what they know of you from the approach. The main thing is actually escalating and getting to the point to set up the date, because to a certain degree they've kind of already made up their mind of who you are and if they're interested or not. There's like a little bit of variance, but for the most part, text is just a means to capitalize on the interest and use that interest to like get them on a date. If they viewed you as charming and fucking cool and shit on the date, like they already like you, so having whatever text game isn't going to further convince them that you are a certain thing, because they already know who you are from the fucking cold approach. So there's no reason to do text game if they're interested. If they're not interested, there's still no point to do text game, because how they view you in person will always override how they view you through some other method. I don't know if you know a person who you know them in real life, and then maybe they post on social media and they're a completely different person. I've known a few different girls who, like, in person, they're very negative, just kind of bitchy people and complaining all the time. But then on social media, they're like, oh, God bless this, and I'm so grateful for this, blah, blah, blah. Like, people just trust in-person stuff more. So if they already like you, they already like you. You're not really going to convince them further because they already have the conception of you. If they don't like you, they're going to view everything through that lens. So there's kind of nothing you can say to convince them out of it. It's not like they're going to see you as like, he's not charming, I'm not really that interested, or blah, blah, blah. And then you say some words through text, no vocal tonality or anything like that, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, now he's charming, and that overrides what I know of him in person. Like that doesn't happen. So text game on cold approach, the main thing is just getting them to the point to go on a date. I'll leave another voice down in just a second. All right, so predominant reason for ghosting after they seem excited. Yeah, that just comes down to how they are as a person and just kind of inherent randomness. So, like a girl could be in a relationship, but for some reason, there's a whole bunch of reasons why the girl would just want the experience of being approached and all that other stuff, but they don't actually intend on hooking up ever. They could be in a relationship, they could, whatever. And then also, one thing, it's crazy how guys, to a certain degree, don't view girls as actual people. Because if a girl is nice, by default, like they're just a nice person, they're going to be nice to everyone. So if you approach them, they'll be nice to you. If they have good social skills, and that's just what they do for everyone, they'll ask you questions. If a girl is high energy or excited kind of all the time, they will be that way towards you as well. So what guys will do is they'll think that all those things definitely correlate to, oh, she's sexually interested in you. But when you really think about it, it doesn't make sense. I'm assuming, like, you're probably like a normally like kind of nice person or whatever. If a girl who you weren't attracted to just came up to you and had a normal conversation with you, and like it was during the day, and she just had a conversation with you, you'd be nice to her. You'd probably nice to everyone. And let's just say at the end, she was like, hey, can I get your phone number? Blah, blah, blah. Most guys, I do this. I'm a pretty nice person. I don't do it as much anymore. That's kind of 50-50. But yeah, there are some times where like I will just give a girl my number because I'm like, I want to be nice. Sometimes I'll put it off, but I'm inherently kind of a nice person. So I would just give her my number, like assuming you're not attracted to the girl, just kind of to be nice. You're gonna be a nice person to kind of everyone. So it's kind of the same thing with the girls. They will, if they're just a nice person, they're a nice person. And they're even less confrontational than guys. So there's a higher likelihood that her being nice and not wanting to have confrontation, that she will give you the number just because she's kind of being nice. That's not her being a bitch. That's not her, oh, why did she think this one thing and blah, blah, another. It's, she's a person. She can be nice when she wants. And she can avoid confrontation if she wants. You might think, well, what am I going to hit her or something? Maybe not hit her, but you would be surprised at the guys that would think, she didn't give me her number, but she was nice to me, but she didn't give me her number. What a bitch. The amount of guys that think that, to a certain degree, you kind of think that even just asking that question. Why would she be nice but not give me her number? So that's the thing, is like, it's kind of assuming girls aren't their own people and have their own personality traits and act certain ways. So I would say the main reason for girls ghosting after they seem excited is they could have, I don't know the exact percentage, but I know the overall reasons are they just liked the experience, like they were enjoying it, or, hold on a second. Okay, just had to fucking cross the street. So they enjoy it and they just like the experience. They're not gonna actually like cheat on their fucking husband or boyfriend, but they're like, oh, this was nice, cool, I'm still attractive. And you can't hold that against them. Everyone needs validation externally to a certain degree. So it's either that, or they're just nice people and they're kind of like that with everyone, or you know they they are actually attracted to you in the moment, but they just, you can be attracted to a person and also be a nice person but not want to sleep with that person. So it's usually just when you kind of take into account that like girls are people and they act like people normally do, it explains a lot of this shit. A good overall analogy to use for cold approach is it's kind of like poker. So poker is mostly random, okay? The really good poker players are guys who are able to find the small percentage of things you can control and maximize it to the highest possible degree. So when you understand the numbers and the inherent randomness and you have enough approaches and enough data points, even the randomness to a certain degree becomes predictable. Like you kind of have a range, like, okay, if I do this, there's a certain percentage, blah, blah, blah. So it's the same thing with cold approach. Most things are out of your control, but over a large data set, the person who's good will actually get laid. So you could have two guys, they both do 100 approaches. And if you only go based on a data set of, let's say, 10 approaches, you could have the first guy, first 10 numbers, he happens to get a positive wave, like a disproportionate amount of numbers for whatever reason. And the other guy, the first 10 approaches, he happens to get a disproportionate amount of no numbers. All right. So if you look at that, you'd be like, well, the first guy's obviously better because he got more numbers. But then you look at it in the span of like 100 or 150 approaches, it actually turns out that the first guy just got a positive wave, the second guy just got a negative wave, and over 150 approaches, the first guy maybe got one lay, and then the second guy got 4 or 5 lays. Cold approach is so different from social circle or having status or all that other stuff. There is just inherent randomness in it, and you just have to take that into consideration, basically. So yeah, once you get in a large enough data set and you see, like, you start to see different patterns. That's why a lot of the things I say, like, most guys can't really relate to a certain degree the things that I say because they don't have a large enough data set. I have around 10,000 approaches. If another guy only has 150 approaches, he will never be able to see the patterns that I've seen because he doesn't have a large enough data set.